In this video, I wanted to talk about the anatomy of a class, and so I've opened the Figures project, which is in Chapter 1, and you notice that it consists of these classes, and I'm going to choose the Circle class, right-click on it, open the editor, so that you can see the source code. And I wanted to go through the main sections of this. The import statements that you see at the top are for including libraries that contain Java classes that are needed by this particular class in order to work. And we won't talk about these in detail right now, but you will see these in some of the projects, particularly this project because it involves shapes, and these two libraries are needed in order to draw the shapes properly. Now, the actual Circle class code begins right here with this line of code, public class Circle, and extends all the way down to the bottom. If I scroll down, all of this code that you see comprises the Circle class. So I wanted to talk about what's in here. It looks like it's very complicated, but it really isn't that bad. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top. Now, in a class, at the very beginning of the code, the section that I'm highlighting here, these are called the fields. And fields are also known as variables, and they're places where you can store information. In this case, there are 5 different fields. The names of the fields in this case are diameter, which is where you can store the diameter of the circle, and then x position and y position are 2 variables that determine where the circle is going to be drawn on the screen, so the x and y coordinates. The color field is going to store the color of the circle, and then is visible is a field that will determine whether the circle is drawn or not drawn. And so whenever you have fields in a class, they're always defined at the top. In other words, you would never see these fields down lower in the code. So for instance, you wouldn't see them down in this section. You always put the fields up at the top. We'll talk more about the fields later. Now, this section of code that I'm highlighting is called a constructor. And a constructor is a section of code that runs when you create the object. So whenever we create an object from the Circle class, the code in this constructor is going to run. And in this case, it's initializing the field. So it's setting the diameter to 68, the x position to 230, the y position to 90, and the color to blue. But you could change these values. For instance, if you wanted all circle objects to start out with a diameter of 100, you could just edit this code and change it to 100. So constructors are sections of code that run when you create an object. Now, following this, I'm going to highlight some other pieces of code. This is called a method. A method is a section of code that performs some sort of action on the object. In this case, this method, the name of the method is makeVisible. This causes the object to appear. You notice here's another method called makeInvisible, and this does the reverse of makeVisible. It causes the object to disappear. Here's another method called moveRight, which causes the object to move right by a certain amount. There's a moveLeft method, a moveUp method, a moveDown method, and so on. And if you continue down in the source code, you'll just see the various other methods. Here's move horizontal, move vertical, and so on. This is basically what classes consist of. If you wanted to say what's in a class, the answer would be fields, 1 or more fields, and then 1 or more methods. By the way, this constructor is a type of a method. So really, in this source code, there are only 2 things. There are fields and there are methods. And so this is important. So let's close this source code up and let's look at another class. Let's look at the person class and see if we can just identify the fields and the methods. I need to resize this so we can see it. That should all be visible now. Okay, so once again, now this is a different class, but let's see if we can identify what's in it. Well, the beginning is the import statement, which includes libraries that this particular class needs. Here's the beginning of the class, public class person. And here's all the fields. Notice that this one has more fields than the circle class, but they're all defined together at the top. We have a field for the height. We have a field for the width. X and Y position are basically the same as they were in the circle class. They determine where the object's going to be drawn. The color and is visible field. Here's a constructor, which is a type of method that's used whenever you create an object from the person class. This constructor is going to run, and basically it initializes these fields to these values. Here's a make visible method, which is identical actually to the one in the circle class, make invisible, move right, and so on. So you should be able to, at this point, open up any class. For instance, let's take the triangle class, open it up, and you should be able to scroll through it and identify the name of the class, which is always the first line, the fields, and you should be able to get an idea of what they do just by looking at the names of the fields. And then scroll down, and almost always you'll see a constructor method, and then you'll see various other methods. So you should try that out. Open up another project in the book, and just see if you can identify these parts of a class.